Where the Flame Trees Bloom by Alma Flor Ada. Choices. My father's family and my mother's family were as different from each other as a quiet mountain stream and the vast ocean. My father's family was small in contrast to my mother's, with its many aunts, uncles, first and second cousins, great aunts and great uncles. But not only was my mother's family large, it also was very lively, cheerful, and adventurous, while my father's father and brothers were quiet people who seldom spoke about anything personal. We frequently spent our evenings together listening to stories of my mother's family. Through these stories, people whom I had never met seemed as familiar to me as those who lived nearby. It seemed as though I had heard their voices and taken part in their adventures. But it is a story told to me by my father's father that I would like to share with you now, a story that remains vivid in my memory and that has greatly shaped who I am today. My grandfather Modesto would stop by my house every afternoon for a short visit, always with a cigarette between his yellowed fingers. He would pat me on the head or give me a formal kiss on the forehead, and then he would sit and talk with my parents about the political and social issues of the day. He sounded very knowledgeable to me, but also adult and remote. He was a large, formidable man, and although I listened in fascination to his words, I felt as if it would be many years before I would be able to share anything with him, or he with me. One afternoon when he arrived, my parents had gone out, and I was the only one at home. He sat to wait for them in the dining room, the coolest room in the city house where we lived. The house was bathed in the quiet so prevalent in the tropics during the hottest part of the day. As usual, I was buried in a book. Then my grandfather Modesto called my name and motioned for me to sit on his lap. I was surprised by this gesture of warmth and affection, since I was almost 10 years old, and especially since he never asked any of us to sit by him. Yet I welcomed the invitation to get close to this man who seemed so remote and yet so wise. I never knew what prompted him to tell me the story that came next, but I have always treasured it. You probably know that I was once very wealthy, he began. As I nodded, he continued. I was only 12 years old when I left Spain to come to Cuba. My father had died, and since my oldest brother was arrogant and mean, I decided to leave my home at La Coruña. I roamed the port until someone pointed out a ship that was about to sail, and I managed to hide aboard. A sailor discovered me shortly after the ship set sail, but the captain said I should sail with them, and when we arrived at Havana, he helped me get ashore. I searched for work, and fortunately I was taken in by the owner of a hardware store. He worked me hard. I cleaned the store and helped him with all kinds of odd jobs. I had to sleep in the storage room on some burlap sacks, but I learned the business well. One day, a young American came into the store with a surprising machine that played music from round black discs. It was made in the United States and was called a gramophone. I was astonished and excited. Imagine a machine that could bring the great opera singer Enrico Caruso's voice into each home. I made arrangements with this man and set out to sell this new invention. Eventually, I became a major representative in Cuba for RCA, the manufacturer, and traveled the island from end to end. I loved the land around Camagüey and saw how cattle could thrive on these fertile plains, so I bought some land. The land turned out to be even more valuable than I thought, and I became rich. He paused. Even though I didn't know then the meaning of the word nostalgia, I know now that it is exactly what I saw in his eyes. The years passed, he continued. I married your grandmother, and we had 4 sons. Then she became very ill. Since she was too ill to be moved, I had a doctor come to the hacienda. But although he did all he could, she did not improve. One evening, an exhausted horse and rider galloped up to the hacienda. The rider was my business manager in Havana. He'd ridden at top speed from the train station in Camagüey, and close up I saw that it was not only exhaustion that marked his face, but panic. "You must come to Havana immediately," he urged me. "There is a financial crisis and the economy is collapsing. The president of your bank sent me to warn you. It's urgent that you travel to the capital in person to withdraw all of your money, or else it will be lost." I considered his alarming news as the man looked at me impatiently, unable to understand why I wasn't ordering fresh horses to take us to the train. But was I to leave your ill grandmother? He paused again, and I saw the look in his eyes had changed. This new feeling was one I recognized even as a child. My own eyes must have looked the same the day I found a bird, which only a short while ago had been alive, lying dead in our backyard. My grandfather finished the story. "I did not return with him. Your grandmother did not get well, and the economy did collapse before I could get my money from the bank. I was no longer a rich man, but I was there by your grandmother's side until the end, and I held her hand in mine as she passed away." I looked down at my grandfather's big hand, which was covering my own, and then I knew I would not have to wait until I grew up to understand my grandfather Modesto. There is no one alive today who remembers Maria Ray Paz, the grandmother I never knew, and there are probably very few people living who remember my quiet but steadfast grandfather Modesto. Yet I am certain that these ancestors of mine live on in my children, who have known from a young age what choices to make when loved ones are concerned.